So I went to San Francisco State and took courses in creative writing. And I think there is something about having decided to jump in with both feet that has its own magic quality to it. Because a lot of people want to do something, but they don't do it fully. They step in a little bit and they step back out. They're scared. But to do something well, you cannot do that. To do something well, you have to throw your whole being into what you do. There is no if and but about it. So to jump in, you know, like when you're standing at the swimming pool and you put your toe in and it's cold, and you're like, oh no, I'm not sure if I'm going to swim. I'm not sure I'm going to swim. It's too cold, you know? And then you stand there forever, wasting time, you know? But in your heart, you want to swim. In your heart of heart, you want to dive into the blue water. And I think that's what I did. I think that's the greatest thing I did for my career, was that I had no idea if I'm going to be able to swim in that cold water. But I just didn't want to just stand there at the edge and dip one toe in and the other. So I jumped in. And I jumped in, and it's fantastic water. The first semester in creative writing, I took a class in autobiography. And these classmates of mine, beside the fact that I was the only Asian at this point in the whole department, creative writing department, I was also the only immigrant in the whole department. Everyone else was white, and there was one black person, but that was it, and there was one Asian. And I had to write 3-page worth of autobiography and read it out loud in the class. Everybody had to do this, and they wrote very well. These people, some of them had already PhD in literature, but they wanted to get an MFA because they want to write creative writing. And some of them have published, and here I am, haven't been published at all, and not even sure if I can write a full English sentence. Had to write a 3-page essay about my life and why I am in the creative writing program. And I was to go like 6th or 7th or something, which is like the next week. So I spent 3 days writing this essay, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, polishing it, writing it. And when I read it in class, I finished reading it, I remember, and looking up, and there was this silence in the room. And I had no idea the silence was good or bad, but it was silence, you know. And then the professor started to cry. And then some other people started to cry. And I started having tears in my eyes too. And I was shocked again, because here was the power of language that can move. I talked about the war. I talk about remember the bombings. I talk about children who went back to the holes that the B-52 bombs had left in the countrysides, and the water filled up, and the children turned those into swimming pools. And I talk about how all those memories haunted me, and I wanted to find a place in American imagination. And when I saw these people cry, I kind of started crying a little too. But deep in my heart, I understood that language moved people. And I understood that to be able to use language wisely is to be able to change hearts and minds. So it was a good lesson. And it was also a great opportunity, because one of my classmates was a journalist, and her boss was looking for someone who can write with the kind of perspective that I had. And within a week, I had a phone call. This is my first semester at San Francisco State. And her name is Sandy Close. And she said, would you like to come down and talk to me? because I want to see if you can write for my newswire service. It's called Pacific News Service. And I said, well, not really. I don't want to be a journalist. I want to be a writer. And she said, well, just come down anyway. We're having a party for Christmas, I remember. And so I said, okay, well, if it's a party, then I'll go. And I went. And she said, well, it's a week before Christmas. Write something about Christmas. So all right, I'll write something about Christmas. I wrote something about Christmas, sent it in. Within a week, 6 newspapers picked up my essay, and I got a check for $150. This is 14 years ago, so it was good money, especially. But what's more interesting was to see my name in print. Andrew Lam, writer for Pacific News Service. It's quite amazing to see your name in print for the first time. You kind of shake like this, and like, oh my God, I'm published, And then she didn't need to ask me to write something else because, within the same week I wrote another piece and sent it to her. And another five newspapers published my articles, and more money came my way. And I was hooked. And I think this was in 1989. And 1990, she sent me to Hong Kong to cover boat people, refugees who were being forced back to Vietnam. And so I went as a reporter. I was the only American reporter allowed into the refugee camp because I went undercover as an interpreter. White reporters were turned away because they were not allowed, journalists were not allowed in the camp. But they didn't know. The racism of Hong Kong was interesting. It's against its own race because it doesn't assume that if you're Asian that you can be a writer. So that a Vietnamese guy showing up could not possibly write for an American newspaper. So I was the only one in the refugee camp. And so that began my career as a reporter and journalist. But at the same time, I went to creative writing because I wanted to write fiction. So I wrote fiction along the way, and I published in different anthologies and literary magazines. And so I think that's where I am right now, is where I am leading a writing life. My parents are very interesting because over the years I've been published in many newspapers and magazines, and I'm on radio now, and I'm going to do a TV documentary for PBS. And I've won quite a few awards along the way. I really don't have a strong feeling one way or the other about awards, except for they help you with your resume. But my parents are the ones who are boasting about my success to their neighbors. If you visit my parents these days in their house in San Jose, they will walk you across the living room where there's shelves. On top is the picture of grandpa and grandma and ancestors and incense and Buddha. But at the bottom is all the diplomas of the children and my journalism awards. And they would say to the guests, yes, this is Andrew Lam's awards, So it's almost like a required tour. Before you go to sit down on the sofa, you have to look at my awards at my parents' house. So they turn around, obviously, because they're terribly, terribly proud. And I think this was a good lesson as well, because you can love your parents and you can honor them, but you cannot love your parents and honor them if you don't love and honor your own vision of the world.